Respected brothers, sisters, respected scholars, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It gives me a great honor to be here in Denmark, mashallah. I think it's the first time I've been here. Maybe I've driven through once upon a time, I can't recall, many decades ago. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. By time, one interpretation is by time, or by the asr time, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. That every single individual, male, female, adult, youth, are all in loss. Everybody is in loss, is in a state of loss. You know what they say nowadays, you know, the youngsters, I'm not sure in Denmark, but they say you're a loser. You're a loser. That everybody is in the state of loss. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qualifies this statement by saying, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Besides those who believe, who have a firm belief in Allah, but not just a firm belief. Not just a firm belief, but what kind of iman? What kind of belief? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. A belief which propels them, which is a catalyst, which is a motivation for عَمِلُ الصَّالِحَاتِ, for good action. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Those who believe in Allah, but not just who believe in Allah, but those who have an iman, a belief in Allah which propels them to do good actions. These are the people that are successful. Everybody other than this are those people who Allah defines as those who are losers. In another place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking about iman, what does He say? He said, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا آمِنُوا. Oh, you who believe. Let me ask you a question. How can you believe if you already believe? How is it possible? Either you're a disbeliever or you're a believer. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? What does Allah mean? As Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he says, تحصيل الحاصل محال. To attain that which you already have is impossible. Either you're a believer or either you're a disbeliever. So let me give you an example. I gave, maybe some of you have seen it on YouTube as well. See, you have a man who's a bit feminine in nature. Yeah, who's a bit feminine in nature. He's a bit girlish. So you say to him, bro, be a man. What do you mean? He's already a man. How can he become a man when he's already a man? So what you are saying, bro, become a real man. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا آمِنُوا. Oh, you who believe, become true believers. If you want to see a man who was a true believer in Allah, it was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. If there's any person whose iman propelled him to do good actions, with Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لَوُزِنَ إِيمَانُ أَبِي بَكْرٍ وَبِإِيمَانِ أَهْلِ الْأَرْضِ لَرَجَحَ بِهِ. لَوُزِنَ إِيمَانُ أَبِي بَكْرٍ بِإِيمَانِ أَهْلِ الْأَرْضِ لَرَجَحَ بِهِ. If the iman of the entirety of humanity was placed on one side of the scale, and just the iman of Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu was placed on the other side of the scale, the iman of Abu Bakr would be heavier than the iman of the entirety of humanity. This was the iman which propelled him to do good actions. Upon occasion, the Prophet ﷺ turned around after Salah and he said, "Who from amongst you is fasting?" And Abu Bakr said, "Be a messenger of Allah." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Who amongst you has followed the janazah today?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Be a messenger of Allah." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Who from amongst you has spent upon a miskin?" Has spent upon a miskin, a poor person. And Abu Bakr said, "Me, O Messenger of Allah." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Who from amongst you?" It's the same gathering. He said, "Who from amongst you has visited a sick person?" And Abu Bakr said, "Oh, me, O Messenger of Allah." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Whoever has these qualities in him, there I see no other abode for him but Jannah. I see no other abode for him but Jannah. His dwelling will be Jannah." What was this? This was an iman which propelled him to do action. A day in the life of Abu Bakr. This was a normal day. Have we ever had a day like a normal day in the life of Abu Bakr Siddiq? When you enter into Jannah, the doors of Jannah, who will they call to? Have you ever thought of it? The Prophet ﷺ said that the doors of Jannah, there will be a door, which will be the door for Salah, for those who observe their Salah. And it will call, it will say, "Oh, you who observe your Salah, enter through me." Another door, the Prophet ﷺ said, would be a door for those who perform jihad. That door will say, "Oh, believers, oh, mujahideen, enter through me." The Prophet ﷺ said another door, which will be a door of sadaqah. And those who gave sadaqah profusely will enter through this door. There will be another door, the door of Rayyan. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Those who fasted profusely will enter." This door will say, "Enter through me." Abu Bakr was sitting there and he said, "O Messenger of Allah, tell me, is there any door, is there any person that all the doors of Jannah will call to?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Arju an takuna minhum ya Abu Bakr." I am optimistic that you will be that person that all the doors of Jannah will call to. The doors of Jannah call to who? They call to the people of actions. They call to the people of actions. And this is the beautiful thing about this deen. See, if you even intend to do good action, but you don't do it, Allah will reward you. You can work day, night, your entire life, but you will only attain that which Allah has written for you in your rizq. That's what you will attain. But as far as good actions are concerned, the Prophet ﷺ said, if a person intends to do a good action and he doesn't do it, Allah will still write in that good action. You intend to do a good action, but you are unable to do that good action, Allah will still write that good action for you. When it comes to good action, there is no ceiling. And this is why as believers, we should have high aspirations. We shouldn't have low aspirations. Believers should have high aspirations. Ibn al-Qayyim Hikmah gives the example of people who have low aspirations. He says, there's a dog, and this dog doesn't like his name. He doesn't like to be called a dog, because every time somebody wants to insult somebody else, they say, "You're like a dog." So he doesn't like his name. So he comes to the king of the jungle, the lion, and he says to the lion, he says, "Change my name. I don't like my name." So the lion says, "You deserve that name. You deserve that name. You are like that. That's why people cuss you." So the dog says, "Try it. Test me out." So the lion says, "Okay, here's a piece of meat. Look after it until tomorrow morning, and I will change your name. I will change your name." So he gives him the piece of meat. half the night passes, everything's cool. Half the night passes, everything's fine. Second, latter part of the night now, he starts to eye the piece of meat. Meat's in front of him. How he starts to look at the meat. And then all of a sudden he starts to drool. You know, drool? His mouth gets wet, saliva starts falling. Latter part of the night, his dog nafs gets the better of him. He can't no longer withhold himself. So he says to himself, he says, dog? He said, dog's a good name. He said, who said dog's a bad name? He said, dog's a good name. See, now he's talking to himself. He's justifying it to himself. And then he devours the meat. Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyya rahimahullah says, this is the sign of a person who has low aspirations. He has no aspirations in life. And the truth is that today many Muslims have become people who have no aspirations. The true truth is, you know, you speak to Muslims and Muslims just feel a sense of victimization. You know, they blame everybody else for their problems. Everybody else. Oh, it's the government. Oh, it's America. Oh, it's Israel. Oh, it's this, it's that. And then when you say, bro, you know, we need to make a change. And you know what they say? They'll turn around and say, oh, there's no benefit, bro. No good. It's like the dog. No aspiration. You mention any organization to this brother or this sister, he or she's got something negative to say. You mention any individual, they say, oh, that person is like this and that person is like that. But you look at this armchair critic, he's never achieved anything in his life. And this is what's happened to the Muslims today. We have become people of low aspirations. We blame everybody else, negative, pessimist, chronic pessimism, almost contagious. And this wasn't what the Sahaba were like. This is a deen which is meant to motivate people. The Prophet ﷺ came to a group of people who were regarded by the rest of humanity as the lowest of the low. And then he changed the people. Why? Because he gave them a vision. He gave them an aspiration. He told them, look, do a good action. Intend a good action. And even if you are unable to do it, Allah will reward you. And they believe that. Results are not in your hand, results are in the hand of Allah. But the effort is upon me and you. The battle of the book. The battle of the book was like what? The battle of the book was such that this was known as the difficult battle. The Muslims had to travel over 600 miles, approximately 600 miles. It was summer, there was a drought, and it was harvest time. This was the battle where Abu Bakr bought everything that he had, and he presented it to the Prophet ﷺ. Umar bought half of what he had. A third of the army was prepared by Hikmah. And then a group of people come to the Prophet ﷺ, and they say, O Messenger of Allah, we don't even have shoes. We don't even have shoes to wear. We want to go in the battle, but we don't have shoes. And the Messenger of Allah turned them away, and he said, I don't have shoes to give you. So these Sahaba leave the gathering of the Prophet ﷺ, and they were crying because they couldn't participate in the expedition because they didn't have shoes on their feet. And they were given the permanent name, the Bukaun, the weepers. They were known, history records the names until today. They were known as the weepers. And then the Prophet ﷺ goes on this journey, and whilst he's returning, he turns to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. Whilst they are returning from the journey, he says, إِنَّ فِي الْمَدِينَةَ لَرِجَالًا مَا سِرْتُمْ مَسِيرًا وَمَا قَطَعْتُمْ وَادٍ إِلَّا كَانُوا مَعَكُمْ. He said, in Medina there you got. They were sitting in Medina. But the Prophet ﷺ is saying that every step that you took, they got exactly the same reward as you got. They were at home, but their niyyah was to work for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as believers, forget this state of victimization. Forget blaming others. Weakness comes from within. As believers, the responsibility upon me and you is to do the actions. Me and you to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Life is a test for believers. Throughout Europe or the West, you always hear, Muslims complaining and whinging about their lot and their situation. Now you should be aware of what's happening around you. I don't say you shouldn't be aware of what's happening, but you should get on with the actions. Trust in Allah. Have a strong belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An iman which propels you to do action. There is a strong possibility that when you do your actions, you might not even see the results. There's a strong possibility that by the time you die, the situation will be worse than now. But you have nothing to do with the results. You have to make the effort. Victory and loss is in the hand of Allah. The battle of Uhud. Let me take you back to the battle of Uhud. 70 Sahaba are martyrs. 70 Sahaba. Every single one of them, their body is mutilated besides one Hamza. Only one. Every single one. Hamza radiallahu anhu, his body is mutilated. They cut his limbs, they cut his nose, his ears, and then they make a necklace out of his body parts and places it around her neck. Apparently it's lost. Apparently it's lost. You lost the battle, your body being mutilated. But it was on this occasion that Allah gave Hamza radiallahu anhu the title of Asabullah, this lion of Allah. Results are not in your hand. And it was here that Allah, on this occasion, that Allah revealed the verse, لَا تَحْنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمَ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Do not be grieved. لَا تَحْنُوا. Do not be disheartened. Do not grieve. You are the highest in the eyes of Allah. As long as when you leave this dunya, you leave in the state of Iman. You leave in the state of Iman. So the action is upon us. So brothers and sisters, we as believers are people who have high aspirations. We aspire, because even if we don't do the action, Allah will reward us. Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah. Everybody knows Abdullah ibn Mubarak. He was a man, and one year he would go for jihad, the next year he would go for hajj. He lived in Merv. Merv is in Central Asia. Can you imagine? In those days you didn't have, I don't know what your airline is called, but whatever your airline is called, is it SAS? Is that yours? You didn't have SAS, you didn't have British Airways, you didn't have PIA, Saudi Airlines. You traveled from Merv all the way to Mecca. He travels, he goes for Hajj. After Hajj he has a dream that two angels descend, and one angel says to the other angel, says, how many people attended the Hajj? And the angel says, 60,000 people attended the Hajj. Then the other angel asks, he said, how many Hajis Hajj was accepted? And the angel replies that nobody's Hajj was accepted besides a man called Abdullah ibn Muqaffal. He's a cobbler and he lives in Damascus. And Abdullah ibn Mubarak wakes up and he's perspiring, he's shaking. 60,000 people have come for Hajj from all corners of the world, and only one person's Hajj has been accepted. You know, if you move some chairs on the other side, because mashallah there's a lot more sisters than brothers. We see where the ummah is going, Brothers cheering out, mashallah, sisters are mashallah interested in learning about the deen. I know it's cold out there, so it's difficult, I know, brothers, yeah. You feel very cold. So, 60, so what he decides, he goes to Damascus. He enters Damascus and he asks the people, do you know a man called Abdullah ibn Muqaffal? He's a cobbler. They're directly from his house. So he goes to the house of Abdullah ibn Muqaffal. He knocks the door, Abdullah opens the door and he asks, is your name Abdullah? He said, yes. Are you a cobbler? He said, yes. He said, let me relate a dream that I've seen. He said, I saw this dream that 60 people came for Hajj. Nobody's Hajj was accepted and you did not even attend the Hajj. And your Hajj has been accepted. So Abdullah ibn Muqaffal said, you know, me, I'm a cobbler, I'm a poor person. For the last 20 years, I've been gathering money to perform Hajj. My wife became pregnant, and one day she smelled some meat from the neighbor's house. So she said to me, can you go to the neighbor and ask for the meat? You know, pregnant women, when they want something, they want it there and then, especially food. But you guys was like, no, you young guys. Said, so she sent me over. And when I went, I knocked on the door and I said to the man, to the lady who opened the door, I said, my wife is pregnant and she wants some meat. And she can smell you cooking meat. Can you send some meat to the house? So the lady says, that meat is halal for us and haram for you. So Abdullah said, how can it be halal for you and haram for us? So the lady said, my children are yatims. For the last few days we had nothing to eat. And I was walking on the street and I saw the carcass of a donkey, the dead donkey. And I cut the meat of the dead donkey. And that is what I'm cooking to feed my children because they are starving. So it's halal for me but haram for you. Abdullah ibn Muqaffal says, I went home. All the money that I had gathered for 20 years, and I had just enough to do Hajj this year. I bought every single dime, and I gave it to the lady, and I said, this is my Hajj. He didn't even perform Hajj, but Allah wrote Hajj down for him. 20 years, and this had an amazing effect on Abdullah ibn Mubarak. Upon occasion, Abdullah ibn Mubarak was going for Hajj. From where? From Merv to Makkah. And on the way he came and they stopped at a village and he heard some crying. And he told his students, go and ask, what's going on? So they go and they say, oh Abdullah, there's two young girls. Their parents are too poor to marry them off. And that's why they're crying. So Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahimahullah takes every penny that he has and he gives it to the two young girls. This was after traveling for months. He gave every single penny and he turned upon his heels and he went back to Merv. See, the beauty of this deen is that you intend to do an action, Allah will reward you for that action. It's a guaranteed deal. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He speaks about His deen, what does He say? He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, hal adullukum ala tijaratin tunjikum min adhabin alim. He said, oh you believe, shall I not indicate to you what? To what? Allah says, shall I not indicate towards a business? You think you're a businessman? Want to be a businessman? Businesswoman? You want to make the millions? Allah will guarantee you returns. Whatever you have will finish. Whatever you send to Allah is permanent. Will remain. It's a guaranteed business transaction. And therefore, as aspirations, believers have high aspirations. You look at the Messenger of Allah, what kind of aspirations did he give them? Some people have business plans, 5-year business plan, 10-year business plan. I even know businesses which have a 100-year business plan. The director is going to expire, but he's got a business plan, 100-year business plan. What's your aspirations? What's your aspirations? The Prophet ﷺ gave the Sahaba aspirations. Let me give you an example. The battle of Khandaq. The battle of Khandaq. The battle, this was also known as the Battle of Ahzab, the battle of the Confederates. This was the largest army which had ever gathered in that part of the world. They marched on Medina. It was midwinter. The Muslims were starving. They had no food. The Sahaba came to the Messenger of Allah and they said, "O Messenger of Allah, we're hungry, we haven't had anything to eat." And they removed the garment from their stomach and they had a stone tied to their stomach. And the Prophet ﷺ removed his garment and he had 2 stones tied to his stomach. And then they were digging the trench because the only way that they could stop this large army was to dig a trench between themselves. And while they were digging this trench, they came across a boulder, a large rock. And they said, "O Messenger of Allah, we can't break this boulder." So the Prophet ﷺ came and he struck it, and a third of it broke. And there was this huge spark. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Allahu Akbar." Then he struck it the second time, and there was this huge spark. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Allahu Akbar." And then he struck it the third time. And there was this huge spark. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Allahu Akbar." And the Sahaba inquired, "O Messenger of Allah, what was the spark about? What was the Allahu Akbar about?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, "When I struck it the first time, Allah showed me through the spark that a day would come that we, the Muslims, would take and control Yemen. And when I struck it the second time, Allah showed me through the spark that a day would come that the Muslims would take the palaces of Shah, the palaces of Byzantine. And when I struck it the third time, Allah showed me through the spark that the day would come that we would take the white palace of Medina, of the superpower of the day, the Persians, and the Munafiqeen. They began to laugh. And they said, "Look at this man. One of us is scared to go and relieve himself. And he's promising the Muslims that they will be a superpower." Within a period of 15 years, after this incident, the Muslims became the superpower of the world. Why? Because he gave them aspirations. I'm not asking you to become a superpower. Just sort out your own areas. That'd be good enough. Educate your children. Be people who aspire. Be people who contribute to humanity. That's the least that Muslims should be. Muslims shouldn't be widgets. Muslims should be people of action. There should be a difference. There should be a difference between Fatima and Ali, between Jack and Jane. And if there isn't, there's a problem. If there isn't, there's a problem. If there's no difference between you and the non-Muslims in your concern, in your motivation, in your aspiration, and there's a serious problem. Because if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, he came and he motivated the community. He gave them goals. So let me ask you this question. What's your goal in life? What's your aspiration in life? Have you ever thought of it? And people have different aspirations. So you might be at different levels. So if you're like not praying, then your first priority is start praying. Start praying, that is minimum. First priority. Priorities are part of the deen. When the Prophet ﷺ sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen, what did he say to him? He said, "You will meet a group of people, call them to La ilaha illallah. And if they accept, then tell them that Allah has made 5 times salah fall upon you. And if they accept, if they start doing that, then tell them that they should take the zakat from the rich and give it to the poor." It's a priority. So your you should have priority, you should have a goal. So what's your priority? What's making you not pray? Is it the TV set? Then get rid of it. Is it the PSP? Get rid of it. Is it friends? Get rid of them. Write them a text message. There's a few changes I'm making in my life. And if you never hear from me again, you're one of them. Only joking, huh? I don't want literally start, yeah, bro, I heard his speech. Shaykh said, write text message. And then 2 days later, you go back to the same friend. Sorry, bro, I just been hyped up. I heard Shaykh pump me up. But make some changes in your life. Make some changes. Let me tell you a story of a young group of young men. They were sitting by the Kaaba. One was Musab ibn Zubair, the other one was Urwa ibn Zubair, the other one was Abdullah ibn Umar, and the fourth one was Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. So Urwa ibn Zubair was the son of Zubair ibn Awam, one of the 10 who guaranteed Jannah by the Prophet ﷺ. He said, let's make a dua. We're sitting by the Kaaba, let's make a dua. So they say, okay, Urwa, you start. So Urwa says, I want to be, sorry, Musab says, let's make a dua. So Musab ibn Zubayr says, I want to become the governor of Iraq, a particular town in Iraq, and also I want to marry 2 women. Fatima, the daughter of Talha, and Suqayna, the daughter of Hussein. And they say, Ameen. And the day comes, he marries both of them, and he becomes the governor of Iraq. They asked Urwa, what do you want to be? He said, I want to be a muhaddis, I want to be a hadith narrator. I want to narrate the hadith of my beloved sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And they make a dua, and many of the narrations narrated from Aisha, because he was Aisha's nephew, are narrated through Urwa ibn Zubayr. They asked Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, what do you want to be? He said, I want to be the Khalif. So they make a dua, and they say, Ameen. And the day comes, he becomes the Khalif. And they ask Abdullah ibn Umar, oh Abdullah, what do you want? And Abdullah says, I want Jannah. I want Jannah. Nothing in this dunya. I just want Jannah. You know, and this is how believers' aspiration. So if you are praying, then what's the next step? You have a next step. How much knowledge do you seek? How many halaqas do you attend in a week? If you've been practicing 3 years, how much have you increased in your knowledge? What kind of change has happened? You know, Dr. Swaydan gives an example. In Harvard University, they prepared a questionnaire for 100 of their graduates. They said, where would you like to be in 10 years' time? So approximately 90% of them said, in 10 years' time, you know, we want to be rich. We want to be famous. You know, the usual Western kind of, you know, glamour and glitter. We want money, we want to be rich, we want to be famous. They say approximately 10% said, in 10 years' time, we want to be the CEO of so-and-so company. Or I want to start my business and I want to be here in 10 years' time. They left it for 10 years and then they revisited their lives. Out of those 90% were general aspirations, nothing specific. Only 4 of them had reached their aspiration, only 4%. Out of those 10%, who had specific aspirations, who knew where they were going, out of them, over 90% had hit their goals. So as believers, you should have an aspiration. Have you ever heard of that narration where the Prophet ﷺ said, a time would come that humanity would unite against the Muslim like they fought for a platter of food? You heard that narration? They would call against you, so one would say, Libya's ours, the other one says Syria's ours, the other one says Palestine's ours, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, this is ours. They will call against you, like when they call towards a platter of food. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Sahaba asked the Messenger of Allah, will we be small in number? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, no, you will be huge in number. You will be huge in number. But you will be but you will be like the froth on the water. Not even the froth. The scum, the rubbish which gathered in the froth. That's what you will be like. You know the nature of the froth is what? It has no aspiration, it's light. It's got no weight. It's not heavy in anybody's scale. And the second characteristic of the froth, it goes with the flow. Wherever the water takes it, wherever the stream and the river takes it, it goes. It has no direction and aspiration of its own. And that's what the Muslims have become today. Muslims don't have an aspiration of their own. You don't have an aspiration as an individual in your life, let alone a communal aspiration. Let me ask you, what do you do in your community? What do you put back into your community? Let me ask you another question. Syria is happening. Palestine has been happening for a long time. How many of you guys, brothers and sisters, have stayed awake till 2 o'clock in the morning and spoken about, you know what, it's so bad in Palestine. But what action have you done to make a change? What action? You see poverty in the world? What thing have you done to change it? Because you know, if revolutions came through speaking, Muslims would have a revolution every hour. Because speak, anyone can speak. When Ali radiallahu anhu, after the demise of Uthman, this was a time of turmoil. Biggest turmoil that ever befell the Muslim Ummah. What did Ali do? Ali radiallahu anhu said in the pulpit, and he said, "Oh people, you are in need of a rajul fa'ala qawwal." He said, "Oh people, you are in need of a man of actions and not just a person who speaks." Not a person who speaks, a person of actions. That's what we need. But you know the truth is, the change, the first change must come from within yourself. Don't talk about revolutionizing the world if you cannot wake up for the Fajr Salah. And I'm not saying you can't speak about the concern of the Ummah if you don't wake up for Fajr Salah, don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is get your priorities right. Because the help of Allah descends with the action of individuals. When Umar sent Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu in the battle of Qadisiyah, this was the ultimate battle. This was the final battle between the major battle between the Muslims and the superpower of the day. And he said to Sa'd, he said, "Oh Sa'd, know that the vast majority of people who lose the battle is not because of numbers and weapons, it's but because of their sins. Because when you commit sins, the help of Allah is lifted up. The help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is lifted up. So the change comes from within, from brothers and from sisters. The change. You got to change yourself. Let me tell you a story. A man comes home from work. He's tired. You know, he comes home and his young son wants to play with him. His toddler son says, "Dad, I want to play with you." And Dad is tired, so he wants a bit of time. So he says, "Give me a bit of time." And the son is insistent. So, what Dad sees, he sees a newspaper. And on the newspaper, there's a picture of the world. So he gets this paper and he tears it into small pieces. And he says, "Listen son, put this back together. Once you put it back together, then we play." So he thinks this is enough time to, you know, buy him some time, he'll relax, he'll have a cup of tea, and they'll take the boy, you know, 20 minutes. He ain't going to find Barbados and Trinidad up there. It's going to take him a good few hours. So after a few minutes, the boy's back. And Dad looks at the map. Everything's in its place. Denmark's in its place. Even Sweden's in its place. Britain, even England is there. And Dad's shocked. He said, "How did you manage to do this brother says, Dad, he turns it around, turns the paper the other way, and there's a picture of a man. He says, Dad, I put the man right, and the world came right itself. I put the man right, and the world came right itself. You want to change the world? Change yourself. You want to revolutionize the world? Then revolutionize yourself. Because that's where it starts. You look at the life of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. The Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the vast majority of them could not even read and write. The vast majority of the Sahaba didn't know the faraid and the fiqh of salah, the fiqh of fasting. But by Allah, every Sahaba knew how to pray. He knew how to pray in such a manner which connected him with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because these were people who had aspiration. It's on the Battle of Qadisiyah. Let me go back to the Battle of Qadisiyah. The Battle of Qadisiyah. Rustam, who is the second most powerful man on the face of this earth, sends a message to Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. He says, I want to speak to a Muslim. So he sends a man called Rabi ibn Amir. Rabi ibn Amir was a Sahabi who was of African origin. He had spent his entire life in slavery. Entire life in slavery. And Rabi ibn Amir radiallahu anhu comes to the gathering of Rustam. And Ibn Kathir mentioned that they had adorned the tent like never before. The tent had silk lining. It had pillows which had rubies and emeralds on it. Because they thought that this Bedouin would see this and he would be overpowered. So he comes to this tent on his donkey. And they say to him, get off your donkey. And Rabi ibn Amir said, you called me, so I will not submit to what your desires. I will go inside with my donkey. So he enters into this beautiful tent. Never had the tent been adorned like today. Never before. And he enters into the tent. And none of the dunya, none of the silk lining, the rubies and emeralds affect him. Why? Because Rabi knew that the thing that he had was far greater than the dunya which was presented in front of him. I ask you today, what's your criteria in life? What's your criteria in life? How do you judge people? Do you judge people by the cars that they drive? Is that where most of them reach? You know, you get a new Q7 or an X5 and you get friends that you didn't know about. Is that your criteria? If that is your criteria, then wallahi, you have a sad existence. Is it because people bank balance? You get a rich person coming to the gathering and all of a sudden you get all polite? Then that's a sad existence. But let me tell you, let me share a secret with you. That rich person ain't going to share his money with you. So there's no need for you to suck up to him. He ain't going to give you any of his money. What do you judge a person? Judge a person by the house that he lives in? Is that your criteria? Bricks and mortars have become your criteria. And this is the reality, the vast majority of people. This is what we judge people by. We have shallow ways of judging other people. Muslims are not meant to be like this. Muslims judge other people by man's humanity, person's concern. Person's concern. What kind of person is this? Does he really have a concern for humanity? Does he have a concern for the ummah? Is he a person who has good character? That's what we judge people by. We don't have superficial criteria. So Rabi ibn Amir, he enters into this gathering. And when he enters right into the midst of the gathering, Rustam's cronies, they see Rabi. They see this guy who's of African origin, who was a slave. And they begin to laugh at him. Because he had his own clothes on, which had patches on him. And he was riding a donkey. And they saw these patchy clothes, a slave, an ex-slave. They saw his sword. His sword, the sheath, was made out of cloth. And the tip of the sheath had a piece of leather on it. And they saw his ride. It wasn't a Q7. It wasn't a Mercedes or BMW. It was a donkey. And they judged it by the zahir, by the apparent. Like today, we judge people by the apparent. We judge how good looking is he, or how good looking is she. Zahir. And this is what they did. And they began to laugh. But little did they know that under that dark skin and those patchy clothes were characteristics for which Allah defined them as radiyallahu anhu or radu anhu, that Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Allah. And then he sits in front of Rustam. He gets off his mount and he sits in front of Rustam. And Rustam had placed a cushion for him and he removed the cushion, he sits on the floor. And Rustam asked, why did you sit on the cushion? He said, because I prefer to sit on the earth of Allah. And then Allah asked him, and then Rustam asked him, he said, why have you come? He said, why have you come? Listen to his response. What did he say? He said, Wallahu ta'ala. He didn't say that Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas said to me. He didn't say Umar ibn Khattab Amir al-Mu'mineen said to me. He didn't say that the Messenger of Allah said to me. He didn't say, what did he say? He said that Allah sent us. Our duty is from Allah. He said, وَاللَّهُ تَعْذَنَا لِنُخْرِجَ مِنْ شَعْبِ عِبَادِهِ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ الْعِبَادِ إِلَى عِبَادَةِ رَبِّ الْعِبَادِ وَجَوْرِ الْأَدْيَانِ إِلَى عَدْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ وَضِيقِ الدُّنْيَا إِلَى سَعَةِ الْآخِرَةِ. He said, Allah sent us to remove whoever He wishes, first from the servitude of man to the servitude of the Lord of man. SubhanAllah. Nobody knew better than Rabi ibn Amir what it meant to be the servant of another man, because he spent his entire life in the state. To remove whoever He wishes from the servitude of man to the servitude of the Lord of man. From the unjust nature of other religions and systems to the justice of Islam. And from the tight confinement of the dunya to the vast expansion of the hereafter. And then a discussion happened between him and Rustam. And right at the end of this discussion, Rustam goes back to his men. And he says to his men, he said, have you ever seen a man who was more articulate and more confident than this man? Rabi ibn Amir hadn't studied in Oxford or Azhar or Medina or Gilban or Harvard or Cambridge. He hadn't studied in these places. But he was inspired by Allah. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who make an effort in our path, Allah says, we show them the path. We guide them. We inspire them. Allah inspires them. And he says to his men, he said, have you ever seen a man who's more confident than this man? And you know what they said to him? He said, hey Rustam, don't you incline toward the religion of this man? For don't you see his clothes? Don't you see his right? You know what Rustam said to him? One meeting with a believer. One meeting with a believer. You know what he said to them? He says, fools, don't you understand that these guys don't care about their clothing and their rights? They have a greater aspiration. They have a greater aspiration. And that's what believers should be like. Believers are high aspiration. How long are you going to live in the dunya? How long are you going to live in the dunya? I'm not saying, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a job, you shouldn't have a house, you shouldn't have a car. If you've got Allah's giving you money, have a nice car. I'm not saying that. But if that's your entire aspiration in your life, that's your only aspiration, accumulating, and that's not what believers are made for. We are made for a life which is eternal. Luqman the Hakim said a beautiful statement. He said, work for the dunya according to the time that you're going to live in the dunya. And work for the akhirah according to the time that you're going to live in the akhirah. Now I ask you, how long are you going to live in the dunya? Compared to the akhirah, how long are you going to live in the dunya? But you know, we get caught in the rat race, we become like everybody around us. Everybody around us got a big car, we need to have a bigger car. Somebody's got a big house, we need to have a bigger house. And we get caught in the rat race. And this is not what believers are meant to be like. Believers are meant to be like people who aspire, who who have a greater goal. Who have a greater goal. Believers are meant to be people when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ تَعْمَرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. You are the best of people. You, the ummah, are the best of ummah. But when humanity sees your khayr, when humanity sees your good. So as believers, we should have, now let me just put some basic things. As believers, we should be people who change ourselves. We should be dynamic, vibrant, muta'addi. We should be reaching out to other people. We should be doing work within our communities, within our youngsters, within our children. I don't know what the education achievements are. What's the academic achievement of the youngsters in Denmark? Anybody tell me? Good Muslims. High, low? You don't know?
Among it's very few the boys amongst us get very bad education, whereas the girls are doing really good.
The brother is saying the boys don't do too well, the sisters do a lot better. I can gather that turnout.
These are non-Muslim statistics.
Okay, these are non-Muslim. And this is exactly one of the problems that we have in the UK. Achievement-wise, education-wise, Muslims are second lowest. When I say Muslims, let me make it clear. Pakistanis and Bengalis, and I think Somalis fall in the same category, which is the vast majority of Muslims in, no, it's not Arabs in England, are second lowest to the Afro-Caribbeans. Second lowest. What was our first revelation? Read. So now let's have a vision for our children. What's your vision for your children? As Malcolm X said, anybody can breed children. But what's your vision for your children? Islamically, education-wise, what's your vision for your children? Everybody should endeavor, should inspire to at least, and I know this situation is different from England, but 5 times madrasa, or if not madrasa, at least at home, 5 days a week you should have madrasa. They go to school 5 days a week, you should have madrasa 5 days a week. Where do you want your child to be after a year? Islamically. Where do you want your child to be after 5 years, 10 years? You should have a vision. If you don't have a vision, it's a problem. Because see, the worst thing that you can do to your children is not give them a good Islamic education and give them a good secular education as well. So they reach positions where they can be influential. So if they got Islam, they're good Muslims, and then they are in positions, then they will utilize their position to influence it positively. And if they don't have Islam, then you're going to have a problem, because the same person say, I'm a Muslim. And then he'll say everything which is anti-Islam, anti-Muslim. He will use his position. So that's a vision. That's a long-term goal. You can give them everything else, your children, but if you do not give them Islam, you've given your children a raw deal. Let me tell you straight. You've given them everything, but you haven't given them Islam, then you've given them raw deal. So at home, as mothers, as elder sisters, what kind of tarbiyah do you do of your children? The greatest tarbiyah that you can do of your children is your own actions. That's the greatest tarbiyah. So Shaykh he tells a story about a group of educated youngsters. They go out fishing. So they take their boat and they go fishing. And when they go fishing, they meet this old man, an old fisherman, and they want to have a laugh with him. So they say to the old man, "Oh, old man, do you know anything about algebra?" I go, "Algebra? Never heard of it." He said, "Oh man, you know anything about geography?" He said, "Geography? Only geography I know is from my house to my boat and into the sea." One who was a bit more cocky than the other, one said to him, "Oh, old man, do you know anything about English?" The man said, "English I know. You go Glasgow. English I know." So one who was a bit more cheeky than the rest, he says to the old man, indeed you have wasted a great portion of your life. The old man's hurt, he goes on his way. When he goes on his way, later on they are struck by a storm. So the old man goes with his boat past these young men and they're sitting there shaking. There's a storm, there's wave going into the boat. So the old man says to the young men, he said, young men, let me ask you a question. Do you know anything about swimming? And the young men said, no, we don't know anything about swimming. He says, I may have wasted a great portion of my life, but you have wasted all your life. Because the only thing which counts here is if you can swim or if you can't swim. And the only thing which counts by the court of Allah is your actions. Your bank balances become redundant. When Allah says, "La tuqsa nasibaka min ad-dunya," do not forget your portion of this dunya. Imam Qurtubi says, your portion of the dunya is your kafan. Let me tell you, brothers and sisters, your kafan will not have pockets. Your kafan will not have pockets. And therefore, as believers, we should be people of high aspiration. The Prophet ﷺ said, when you ask for Jannah, what kind of Jannah do you ask for? Jannatul Firdaus. Because second best is not good enough. The dua, when you make the dua, رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Oh Allah, give from our partners and our children that which is the coolness of our eyes. That which is the coolness of our eyes. And make us the imam of the muttaqeen. This is dua that you should read after salah. Every salah you should make this dua. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Oh Allah, give from our partners and from our children that which is the coolness of our eyes, and make us the imam of the muttaqeen. The end of this part, yeah? You know, my wife says that she read this dua from the age of 12. From the age of 12, my wife read this dua after every salah. Allah, give my partner and my children which is the coolness of my eyes, and make me imam of the muttaqeen. So I said to her, that's obviously one dua that Allah didn't accept, but you got me as a husband. Now, if Allah accepted it, you would have got somebody with the coolness of your eyes. But this is what believers aspire to. Believers have aspirations. On occasion, never in Islamic history had so much wealth come into the Muslim world as after Bahrain, after the Muslims took Bahrain. So much wealth came that the masjid was full. The masjid was full, and the Sahaba would come to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ would say, take, and they would take. Others would come, the Prophet ﷺ take. Some people took so much that they couldn't carry it. Anas ibn Malik said that the Messenger of Allah didn't have the word la in his book. He couldn't say no. He couldn't say no. So there's a Sahabi sitting next to the Messenger of Allah. His name was Rabi, Rabi ibn Ka'b al-Aslami. And the Prophet ﷺ said to Rabi, he's sitting there saying nothing. So the Prophet ﷺ says to Rabi, you ask, what do you want? Ask. So Rabi said to the Messenger of Allah, will you give me if I ask? And the Prophet ﷺ said, I will give you. So Rabi says, O Messenger of Allah, أَسْأَلُكَ مُرَافَقَةَ فِي الْجَنَّةِ. So the Messenger of Allah, I ask you your companionship in Jannah. I ask you your companionship in Jannah. And the Prophet ﷺ said, is there anything else that you would like? And the Rabi says, nothing else. Just that. I just want to be with you in Jannah. That's it. And the Prophet ﷺ said that assist me in assisting you by doing profuse sujuds, prostrations. Profuse sujood. If you assist me by assisting you by doing profuse sujuds. Now you look at this. What was the aspiration? What was the aspiration? The aspiration was what? To be with the Messenger of Allah in Jannah. This is the kind of aspiration that believers should have. And in all honesty, my dear respected brothers and sisters, that as believers, the best action that we can do is that action that after you pass away, after you leave this dunya, you've done an action that you lie in your grave, but you're still getting reward for it. So you teach somebody, so you teach your children, and you teach them well. So you die, but you are in your grave, Allah Akbar, but you still getting the reward. Your children make dua for you. You build a masjid, and you leave this dunya, but you still get the reward for it. That is the greatest action that one can do. The Prophet ﷺ gave a beautiful example about 3 people who were on a journey. And they begin to rain like it's raining in Denmark today, and they take shelter in a cave. And when they take shelter in a cave, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me, sisters? No, sisters back can't hear me. The Prophet ﷺ gave an example of 3 people who are on the journey. And while they're on the journey, it begins to rain, so they take shelter in a cave. While they're in the cave, a rock rolls on the mouth of the cave. So they push, they try, they heave, to no avail, they get tired, and eventually they lie down and they wait for death. So one of them stands up, and he says, "Oh Allah," he raises his hand and he said, "Oh Allah, I had elderly parents, and every night before they would go to sleep, I would give them milk to drink. One day I went far out with the livestock, with the cattle, and by the time I came back, my parents had gone to sleep. And I didn't feel it befitting giving the milk to my children before my parents, so I told my wife to put the children to sleep. And all night, I stood at the head of my parents' bed with the milk in my hands. And when they woke up in the morning, I gave them the milk and they drank it. He said, "Oh Allah, if you know that I did this action solely for your sake, then remove the rock." And the rock moved, but not enough for them to come out. Then the second person, he said, "Oh Allah, I had a cousin, and I was infatuated, I was in love with this cousin of mine. There was no woman on the face of this earth that I loved more than my cousin. Many times I made her pass, but every time she turned me down. One day she came to me and she needed some money, and I said, on the condition that you allow me to have a relationship with you. And because she was in desperate need of the money, she agreed. Said when I came close to her, she said to me, "Ittaqillah, fear Allah. Do not break the seal unless you are the husband." He says, when she said the words, "Ittaqillah, fear Allah," the fear of Allah permeated my heart. And I moved back. He said, "Oh Allah, if you know that I done this action," and he said, I moved back and I gave her the money and I let her go. And he said, "Oh Allah, if you know that I did this action solely for your sake, then remove the rock." And the rock moves, but not enough for it to come out. Then the third person stood up and he said, "Oh Allah, I hired a group of people. At the end of the day, everybody took their wages besides one person. What I did with the wages of this person is that I invested it until it mushroomed and it flourished and it grew, and the day came that there was a valley full of livestock. A long time later, this man came back to me and he said, "You know, I worked for you one day and I am desperately need of that money at one day. Please give me that wages of that one day. So I took him to the valley and I said, you see all this? All of it belongs to you. And he said, oh servant of Allah, don't joke with me. I am in desperate need of the money. Give me that one day's wages. And he says that all this belongs to you. And I gave him everything. And he took everything away. He said, oh Allah, if you know that I've done this solely for your sake, then remove the rock. And the rock moves. And all three of them come out. Let me ask you a question. If you were the fourth person in that cave, what action that you've done in your life would you ask Allah to remove the rock? And if you haven't, then you need to become people who do actions. People who are motivated for the sake of Allah. People who have a concern. Because the truth is that me and you will one day leave this dunya. If you go to the graveyard and you look at the tombstones, have you ever gone to the graveyard and looked at the tombstones? You will see 1800, 1850, 1900. You realize that these people have spent more time under the ground than above it. And that is my own reality. The dunya will delude you, no doubt about that. The dunya will delude you. Everything around you will take you in. The cars, the fancy clothes, the trousers halfway down here, the new fashion, the baggies, the tight, the high heel, the low heel, the colorful hijab, the non-colorful hijab, the non-hijab. They will all delude you. They will take you in. Brothers will have their trousers halfway down their backside because it's fashionable. But the truth is, it's temporary. It's temporary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever has been removed from the fire and entered into Jannah, he is the successful one. He is successful. And then directly after this, Allah says, وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. Allah says that the dunya is goods of deception. After success, directly after Allah speaks about the dunya. Why? What's the connection? Because Allah knows that the vast majority of people who will be unsuccessful in this dunya is because of the dunya. What is dunya? Dunya is not just wealth. Don't get it. Dunya is not wealth. Dunya is your position. The position that you have. Dunya could be, you're a hard man. You're a Muslim man. So it gets to your head. You're deceived by it. Dunya could be your beauty. Allah has created you very beautiful, handsome. So all the girls chase you, all the boys chase you. And yet it eludes you. Let me tell you, every favor that Allah gives you is a test. Every favor that Allah gives you is a test. There's no kamar, there's no kamar. I was in Pakistan a couple of years ago, and I went into this school. This was the top school, one of the top schools in Pakistan. It's very difficult to give a talk in this school. Many other people, my friends from Iowa, tried to get into the school, they didn't get in. But after I finished one talk at the university, some of the youngsters came to me and they said, Shaykh, this school, we go to this school, top school, 200 years old. I won't mention the name of the school. He said that when we pass our A-levels, they distribute alcohol. We have a party and everybody drinks. It's in Pakistan. He said, can you come and give a talk there? I said, yeah, if you want me. So he managed, because his father is a very popular surgeon in that city. He managed to speak. His father spoke to the principal and she allowed me to come in. So I entered into this school. This is in Pakistan, yeah? So I entered into this school. There's about 4 guys sitting in the lecture theatre and they saw me. When they saw me, they thought, hold on. They started smirking, they started smiling. I must be thinking, hold on, we heard this guy is from England. He looks like he's from across the border in Afghanistan. So then the lecture theatre filled up. And this is no exaggeration. This is no exaggeration. We have talked in universities all the time in England and other places. I have never in my life seen a Muslim audience like this. The boys are leaning on the girls are leaning on the boys, and it's a Islamic lecture. Out of the 300 students, approximately, and only 2 girls wore hijab. Just 2 girls. Only one guy had a beard, and that was the guy who likes it. So I thought, wow. So I started off. When I got on the plane, I saw these children playing by a tree. And they were playing by the tree, and they were very, very poor. Their mother was selling little stuff on the street. And these children never went to school, their parents were too poor. So I started my lecture, I picked them up and I said to them, MashaAllah, you are the makers and the shapers of the community and the society. You are Pakistan's tomorrow. You will be going to Cambridge, Harvard, and all of this. So MashaAllah, I picked them up big time. The lecturer told me, he said, Shaykh, I can guarantee you, half of these children have never heard Islamic lecture in their life. That's what kind of community families they come from. So I picked them up, and then I thought, let me bring them down to them. I said, MashaAllah, you may be the makers and the shapers of the society. The truth is, you had nothing to do with it. You had nothing to do with it. If Allah wished, Allah could have made you that child that I saw at the airport, who was climbing a tree at school time, whose mother was so poor that she couldn't send him to school. No, you had nothing to do with it. It is the favor of Allah. It is the favor of Allah that Allah made you were born or you were migrants to Denmark. You had nothing to do with it. I know what happened when you go back home. When you go back to Al-Maghrib, Al-Jazair, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Somalia, all of a sudden you got a stride in your step. You sometimes think you're better than your cousins back in Somalia or Pakistan. The truth is, you wear these Nike tops, Nike top in your village when you go back home. The truth is, your cousin made those Nike tops in Bangladesh. They were made by your cousin. But you now have a stride. And the truth is, you had nothing to do with it. Allah decided that you were going to be born in Denmark. Allah decided that He's going to make you beautiful. He made you beautiful. You had nothing to do with it. But I swear by Allah, many people on the day of judgment who have wealth will wish that they did not have wealth. When Allah will bring them to account, many people who Allah created beautiful, and they abuse their beautiful, they transgress the laws of Allah, will desire on the day of judgment that Allah made them like something else. These are all tests. What you do have an impact on is your actions, your character, your akhlaq, your mannerisms. Your mannerisms. That's what you do have an impact on. And that is the criteria that you should have. So my dear respected brothers, I'm going to finish here, sisters. Let's become people of high aspirations. Let's become positive people. Positive. See, let me tell you. Now, I don't know, but let me tell you, let me take you back to England. But I'm sure you have similar problems. See, youngsters, when they start practicing, sisters less, but brothers more. They don't have very high aspirations, in all honesty. And you can judge this by what their discussions are. So the discussions are, oh, yahi, where we put the hand? We put them here, we put them here, we put them here. We join feet, we don't join feet. We do raful yadayn, we don't do raful yadayn. Ameen bil jahr, ameen bil sir. For years they spent discussing these things. What? You guys having a laugh? 1400 years and you haven't sorted your salah out? What kind of ummah are you? 1400 years and you are still speaking about your second pillar of Islam. That is the reality. And it makes them feel good because people like to feel good but better than others. So these are the kind of discussion. Now this is not the discussion that an ummah has which has a goal. These are issues which were dealt with 1300, 1400 years ago. You just came on the scene 6 months, and you think all Islam rotates around you. It's unfortunate, because let me tell you, I mean, it's like quite clear. Many people, when they get into these debates and these arguments, and they spend years doing them, let me tell you, Allah will ask you about the time and the fitna that you caused. The time that you wasted and the fitna that you caused. Ask many guys after 20 years, they realize they wasted their time. They say, you know what? I've wasted 5 years, 10 years of my time. But Allah will ask you, but you see his arrogance. You know, these little issues, petty issues. Go and have a go at this group and have a go at this group. Muslims are meant to be people of vision. If you've got nothing positive to contribute, keep quiet. Keep quiet. But do not cause a fitna. We have too many people, you know, who cause fitna within the ummah, cause discord. Imam Shafi, rahimahullah, who was Imam Shafi? It's unanimous that he was the mujaddid of his time. Imam Shafi once said, he said, my opinion is right, with the possibility of it being wrong. He said, my opponent's opinion is wrong, with the possibility of it being right. Me and you say, my opinion is right, and you go up the highway. Bro, my opinion is right, and you are one of the 72 who are going to Jannah. That's the reality. But ummah which has goal, a ummah which has Bible, so my dear brothers, I'll finish here. Let's be people who leave actions behind. When we leave this dunya, we've done something that even when we're in our grave, we still reap the reward. And it doesn't have to be anything major. You know Salahuddin, you all heard the name Salahuddin. It's one of my most amazing stories. Salahuddin had a teacher called Nuruddin Zinki, Nuruddin Zinki was a Turk, he was the king of Sham, and Nuruddin was a scholar. He was known for his justice. Salahuddin and Nuruddin were known as the later two Umars because of their justice. Salahuddin wasn't just a warrior, he was a scholar. He was a man who never missed his salah with Jama'ah. Never. If you want to hear, I have a talk on Salahuddin, it's on YouTube. This man never missed salah with Jama'ah. He didn't pray next to the Jami, he didn't live next to the Jami Masjid. The vast majority of life was in the battlefield. Even when he was dying, he made sure that the Imam came to his room because he was too scared, too weak to walk. And he would pray salah with Jama'ah. So Nuruddin passed away, and then Salahuddin became the judge. Salahuddin would say, I learned my justice from Nuruddin. Salahuddin was he was assessing somebody's case. And whilst he's assessing the case, he gives judgment against this person. So basically, the judgment is not in favor of this person. So what this man does, he goes to the grave of Nuruddin. And he stands by the grave of Nuruddin and he cries. And he says, oh Nuruddin, only if you were alive, today I would have attained justice. If you were alive, Nuruddin, I would attain justice. You know, a few years ago I went to Syria. And the funny thing was that Nuruddin, if you read his history, he was amazing personalities. Ibn Athir, the famous historian, says, since Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the Muslims never had a leader like Nuruddin. For more than 450 years, the Muslims never had a leader like Nuruddin. He was so pious. He had such a concern for the Ummah. So I was by the grave of Nuruddin. So I told the brothers this story. The story I'm telling you now. So I said that the man came to the grave of Nuruddin. And he said, oh Nuruddin, only if you were alive, I would attain justice today. So Salahuddin heard about this. So Salahuddin called the man again. He looked at his case again. And this time he passed judgment in the favor of the man. So he passed judgment in the favor of the man. Now I'm repeating myself twice. The reason I'm repeating myself twice, because I see some of you guys don't catch my jokes. Yeah, either I'm not a very good comedian, either you got a different sense of humor in Denmark. So I am going slow motion now. Okay. So Salahuddin looks at this case and he passes judgment against him. Sorry, in his favor. So the man starts to cry again. So Salahuddin says, why are you crying for this time? I passed judgment in your favor. So the man said, I'm not crying because of that, but I am crying in the remembrance of a man that his justice was such that even from the grave it has an impact. Even from his grave it has an impact. My respected brothers and my sisters, what action me and you do, that even from the depths of our grave it would have an impact. We need to be people of actions, even if they are small actions. You change yourself, you change your home, you change your family, you change the community around you. As Muslims, we should be people who contribute something positive to the community. And I tell you, you start the momentum, it will pick up. You will start, you don't have it tough. You don't have it tough, you have it very easy. If you knew how people had it tough in Africa, I came from Syria a couple of weeks back. Came back from Syria. I went to Gaza after the first Operation Cast Dead. You have it very easy. You think you have it difficult because you've always had it easy. So your difficulty is relative to what's around you. But the truth is you have it very easy. You should stay in the state of shukr, but we should be contributing something positive to the community and to our families and to all those who are Jazakumullah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us an ummah which recaptures our greatness again. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people who aspire with high aspiration. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us united in the dunya and reunite us in Jannah. Assalamu alaikum.